just going to walk back and forth every couple of minutes.
Hello, ladies. You all just missed Coach Bronson sneaking past the camera before I went live as I was waiting for the live to start. I'm sure he'll make an appearance or 2 or 3 so at some point during this video. Speak of the devil. Say hi.
Who's on?
We got, you know who Bubbles is,
Hi,
right?
Bubbles.
You know who that is,
And Christina.
right? Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Karen, Christina. Oh, we're at a new time this week. I should say. I'm at a new
You're at a
time
new
this
time.
week.
That means they are too.
Yes, we collectively as the community. New time this week, new time for the summer. Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern, that's 6 p.m. Central, and then, what is it, Pacific? 4 p.m. Pacific? Yes. And wherever you are in the world, we are an hour later than we have been. And that is because summer is coming. The days are longer. Sunlight is longer. Oh, let me turn up my volume and my light here. So the days are longer, all that good stuff. And I thought I'd give you all an hour back in your day before I get started on these and give myself an hour back in my day because I was always rushing to get in here after my workout, get home, deal with the traffic and all of that stuff. So these days so it's 7 o'clock Eastern, by 8 o'clock-ish when we hop off, it'll still be light. It's so weird to me right now. I got so used to darker evenings, and now I suppose it's a good thing, but it's a little bit weird, like looking outside at 8:30 at night and it's still bright. All right, we got Aaron on, we got Kim on, a little bit of a group. Tina's with us. Yay, what up, Tina? Becky's on. All right, we got a little gang here. Awesome. All right, let me pull up my notes because we have a packed hour tonight. I am going to try not to speak as loud. I'm going to try not to speak as fast as I did last week because that topic just blew up. We were talking about advanced fat loss strategies, and I could have just gone on and on for another hour. So I just kind of had to cut myself off there, and I was just talking so fast to get it all in. So this week, I'm going to try to woosah, calm down, speak a little slower. Right? No, Christina, I'm right there with you. She says, might be out of the ordinary, but I kind of like my days to end in more darkness. I agree. I think I'm like ready to wind down. I got used to winding down earlier in the evening, and it was dark, and it just felt like I should be winding down. And now when I want to wind down, it's still bright, and it's like throwing me for a loop right now. So anyways, Julie's on. Woohoo! All right. Howdy. Now I know who Wooly NC is.
Wooly MC.
NC, North Carolina. Yes. I love it. All right, ladies, let's get into tonight's topic. We are talking about pre and post-workout nutrition this week. So let's see, where do I even want to begin? We got some really good questions in the group, so maybe I'll just kind of fly through those, quick list of what I'll be covering, because what I have to share will likely cover all of those questions, and I still have them nearby and have those topics nearby. So if I get through everything and I still haven't really addressed those questions, I will go back and answer them more specifically. So just to share, let's see some of the questions from the Facebook group. I got quite a few questions about coffee as a pre-workout, MCT oil, coffee versus caffeinated versus uncaffeinated coffee, fasted training, lots of questions about fasted training. Lots of y'all sharing your routine about what you do with your meals, your meal timing, what you eat pre and post workout. Let's see, questions about, coffee, MCT, training fasted. Those were the biggest questions. If I'd like to know if it makes any difference if you eat all your protein earlier in the day, but work out in the evening. Would it be better if I changed my eating window to later in the day? So questions about, timing of meals and not just timing of meals, but how far between your meals and your training and your workouts, which is a great question. I'll definitely get into that. I have been wondering if maybe a boost of fat before workouts would help with lifts. So helping with strength. Let's see, another thing I've seen is that it's good to have protein first thing in the morning before or with your coffee. Not sure. She said she tried it and she wasn't sure if she experienced any benefits with that. That's a good one to address as well that I didn't originally have on the list. So somebody remind me if I don't go back to the questions and answer them, to go back and answer them more specifically at the end. All right. All right, so the main takeaway today, I got to start with this because this is going to be the key to this topic and every single topic I have ever spoke about and will ever speak about on these master classes. It is the thing I always come back to. I always want to teach you to do more than anything else. And that is to consider your own context to make your own decisions. There is no perfect way to do it, just what's perfect for you. So if you want the short version of every question that's probably been asked and will be asked about this topic, pre and post workout nutrition, it's this. The latest science, or what science has to say, what's evidence-based, what so-and-so has to say, is not as important as how it impacts you. How it impacts your performance in your training, your energy for your training, your strength in your training, your recovery from your training, your overall quality of life. So, as always, the main content I'm going to be talking about here is how to decide what's best for you at any given time. So I always like to say I'm not an evidence-based coach. I'm a results-based coach. And results, 99% of results are about modifying a plan to fit your lifestyle, your needs, your body, your preferences. And when you can do that, the thing that is going to get you the best results is the more consistently you can sustain the training and nutrition that you are following. So at the end of the day, if something is not working for you and it is making life a whole lot more difficult and you are not able to be consistent, then it's time to consider changing something. So that is a question I'll be answering, or one of the many topics I'm going to be talking about in a little bit is when to consider changing something. Actually, you know what? Let's talk about this first. Let me just move this up to the top here. Because bio-individuality rules the game, okay? That's what I want you to always think about before everything else. Bio-individuality. I'm an individual and I am different from the next individual. And in so many more ways than one. Not just our bodies are different, our physiology might be different, our mental health may be different, our personality is different, our jobs and our schedules and our lifestyles and our families. There are our budgets, all of these things come into play when we're considering what's best for me. So first question I want to answer here is when to change what you're doing, because this was a kind of an underlying question under all of those questions that people were asking, right? The only reason you ever ask a question about anything is, I wonder if there's something about the way I'm doing things that isn't ideal. Or maybe I should think about changing something, right? So this is where we're going to come back to this mantra again and again. There is no perfect, only perfect for you. So while there may be new science coming out debunking something else, some new study that says this particular way of training or eating is ideal for muscle gains or ideal for recovery or XYZ, you still have to always apply your own context to that newest cool cutting edge science and consider, okay, just because this fancy new thing sounds like all the rage, is it something I really need to be doing? Does it apply to me? Okay, so when to change what you're doing? One time and one time only, really, when it is not working well for you. So when we're talking about pre and post-workout nutrition, essentially we're talking about two things. Eating in a way, or consuming, because sometimes it's supplements, although today's talk I'm really going to be focusing more on the meals and less on the supplementation. So I will talk about some of the things people asked about, but we could do a whole separate masterclass, and actually I'm planning one because we got some great questions about fat burners the other week, and I think it's about time for me to do a new and improved supplement discussion where we can talk about pre and post-workout supplementation, fat burners, and all the other things in between. So really we're talking more about meals. So meal timing with workouts, the quantity of or the content of the meals, the macronutrient makeup of the meals, the quantity, the size of the meals, the timing of the meals. The reason that is discussed as it relates to sports performance, athletic performance, working out, exercising, training, whatever you want to call it, is for two main purposes. Giving you enough energy for your workout so that you can perform your best. So energy, but I'll also throw in there strength, endurance, stamina, all the things you need to perform well, and then improving or enhancing or maximizing your recovery. Those are the two big pieces when we're talking about nutrition as it relates to training or exercise, okay? The outputs you're going to get in that training session, and then the recovery that you're going to get afterwards, which is where your results are going to come from. Eating a certain way, I'll just go ahead and say this. Eating a certain way in terms of the timing and the meal size and all that related to your workouts does not do anything magical when it comes to fat loss and muscle gain, other than those two things. Ensuring that you can perform optimally, maximally, and recover optimally, maximally. It's not eat this one thing before your workout and you're going to burn a lot more body fat, or consume this during or after your workout and you're going to lose more fat, or you're going to build more muscle. It's not that. There's no magic pill, right? I always go back to this, like there's no magic pill. So, all right. So the only time to change something is when something's not working. You are not performing well in your training. You are not recovering well. You're like, gosh, I am just dragging. I have low energy, brain fog. I can't focus during my workouts, or I'm losing strength. My recovery stinks. I can't get back in the gym again and perform again at the same level next time. I'm not growing. I'm not growing. I'm not getting stronger. I'm not building muscle, right? When you're struggling with what you're currently doing, that is when you want to look at doing something else. Not because you heard so-and-so influencer, guru, doctor, so-and-so who's famous on the internet say that XYZ is better. Not because of some new revolutionary study. Not because it sounds enticing. Oh, I'm keto, but I heard candy before a workout is a good idea. That means I get to eat my favorite candies. So I'm going to try that because XYZ study says simple sugars are the way to go, when really that's just an excuse to eat junk. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. So consider whether or not you actually need to change something, and then consider the context and assess whether a change is even necessary for you. If you're already optimized and things are going well, there's no need to go chasing the science. or chasing the influencer. Okay. Okay, this is interesting. All right, Christina, I may address this in a little bit. And actually, I'm going to get into this. What's so interesting, I'm getting into this right now. She says, that's it, Coach Nat. I need some carbs to keep my energy to get the best workout. So check this out. The reason why pre and post-workout nutrition has become such an important topic in the fitness world is because the grand majority of the fitness industry is still running on carbs as the main fuel source. Okay. Mainstream, anything you hear in mainstream media, when you Google things, unless you have already curated your Google feed to show you a lot of alternative low carb resources, and even if you have, because I'll tell you what, I Google a lot of low carb topics, and I will get studies, but I will also get a lot of BS, a lot of mainstream stuff. I shouldn't say BS. It's not all BS. It's just you have to consider the context. So pre and post-workout nutrition became such a hot button topic. Well, one, because supplement companies hijacked it and made it out to be more important than it necessarily needs to be because it helped them sell supplements. So that's one big piece of it. Anytime a retailer of any sort gets a hold of something, it can blow to a whole new level. So a lot of the whole hype around pre and post workout nutrition is because supplement companies benefit greatly from this information. So, but to the point about carbs for energy for your workouts, pre and post workout is more important when carbs are at play due to blood sugar regulation. What is happening with your blood sugar, with your insulin, when you're consuming carbs? Most in the fitness industry are fueled by carbs. This is when I like to say they're carb burners, right? Look at most bodybuilders, high carb, low fat, moderate to high protein. So this is in the context of a carb burner, then pre and post workout nutrition becomes more important. Oh, this is great. This is a great example here. Tina mentions, I've done it both ways, keto, carnivore, and carbs around workout. I'm not real high carb, but I do find carbs before and after training worked much better for me as compared to just protein and fat. And then she follows it up with a very important next statement. That is pretty much when I consume all my carbs. So she has macros she works with. For those who don't know Tina is a competitor. Tina is a bikini athlete. So she's given macros from her team, from her coach. When we worked together, we built her carbs up. So she now has a much higher bank of carbs than most of you probably do, especially if you're keto. That last piece, though, is so key. That she said it's when I'm consuming all my carbs, right? When you are a carb burner, meaning carbs are your primary fuel source, and those in the fitness industry are going to say carbs are the primary fuel source. Yes, they will be, unless you become fat adapted, unless you teach your body to treat fat as the fuel source. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. But the reason why pre and post workout nutrition is so important in the context of a higher carb diet, and this could still be low carb. This could still be that 150 grams of carbs, 100 grams of carbs, when you're not in a state of nutritional ketosis. The majority of the time, we'll say, because you're not going to be in ketosis all the time. But when you're not eating a keto diet, basically, when you are low carb but you're not keto, you are less likely to be preferentially burning fat as your primary fuel source. You can, especially if you're incredibly active. But the higher you go with your carb consumption, the less you are reliant on fat as fuel. And so when that's the case, carbs are coming in and coming out. For those of you listening, watching, who are struggling on keto and you are constantly on the wagon and off the wagon, you are probably a carb burner. You're not a fat burner. You're not existing as fat as your primary fuel source. So, all right. So in the context of a keto diet, though, if you have been extremely low carb to the extent of a ketogenic or a carnivore diet, and your carbs are very low, and you are literally existing on fat as your only fuel source, not just your primary, but pretty much your only, because your carbs are so small, it can be much simpler. Today's class, I am going to focus more on keto because I'm the Keto Bikini Pro, right? Most people are coming here with questions about how to do this in the context of a very low carbohydrate diet. Just know this. When you are consuming more carbs, even in the context of low carb, but consuming more carbs, tightly regulating your blood sugar is more important than when you're not eating those carbs, because your blood sugar is naturally going to be more consistent without the carbs. So the reason why pre and post workout nutrition is important in the context of higher carbs is because you are going to have to regulate meal timing, meal size, quantity, how many meals a day, how you space them out more closely, because you are getting energy from those carbs. And every single pretty much personal trainer certification, standard nutrition certification, and fitness industry expert will all tell you carbs are your primary fuel source. You need carbs for your workouts because carbs are your energy source. Yes, that is true in the context of when carbs are your energy source, unless they're not. So I just always have to harp on that, because I think a lot of the time, those of us in the keto space, we see these things being said about how important it is to have carbs for energy. And the truth is, if you are predominantly keto carnivore, carbs are no longer your primary energy source. So we have to rethink the way that we're thinking about our fuel source, or where we get our energy from. Okay. This is a good question, Christina. I keep thinking my body just doesn't want to adapt or use my fat for the energy I need. Or am I not giving my body enough time, maybe? Or maybe I just want to fool myself into rationalizing. Girl, we are going to talk about all of that in just a little bit, because yeah, the truth is, if you have not consistently been keto carnivore for months or years, your body could still not be adapted. And if you are reintroducing carbs back in here and there, you really need to be consistently very low carb before your body will really truly shift and recognize that this other fuel source is primary. So it probably is multiple things going on there. I'm going to talk about a lot of those in a little bit. So first things first, let's talk about the timing of meals related to your workouts. Okay. Once again, with carbs in the picture, it is more important, but in general, it's not as important as you think. Here's a simple take home that you can consider, because this is what really matters when it comes to the timing of your meals related to your workouts. There is a sweet spot that I want you to think about for your personal context. And this is ultimately, at the end of the day, regardless of fancy studies, this is what matters more than anything. Number one, that you're not starving. And number two, that you're not so full that you feel sick to your stomach and you're going to throw up if you're going to eat, if you're going to train right after you ate. So you want to find this sweet spot between your last meal and your workout where you are not hungry and you are not full. That right there is like the simplest, easiest way to determine when should I be eating before my workout. A lot of what I see out there of this 30 minutes to 45 minutes before your workout, pre-workout snack, it's no. No. I have never built my day to where I had to have a particular pre-workout snack or meal of a certain size with this many carbs and this many fat and this much protein. I've never given it that much thought. Am I about to eat my arm off? Will I get halfway through my workout and be so starving that I can't finish it because I need to go find food immediately? And am I so full because I just ate way too much that there's no freaking way I can even think about getting in the gym right now or even putting on workout clothes? So for the grand majority of the population, that's the most important thing to consider. How do I feel going into my workout? You want to feel ready to train. You want to have the energy and the strength and the mobility, all the things that you need, the endurance, the stamina. You want to go into the training knowing you can give it your all. If your last meal was too soon or too large for you to feel like you can do that, then you may need to adjust that meal prior to the workout. If you are drained of energy, exhausted, hungry, then you probably need to eat something before you work out. So here's some rules of thumb around the timing. Ideally, I generally recommend eating, not even thinking about your workouts, in general, eating 2 to 4 meals a day spread throughout the day with a good bolus of protein at each of those meals. This is ideal for muscle protein synthesis. We don't want to do OMAD, 1 meal a day. We don't want to do 24-hour fasting when we are trying to build muscle. So, in the context of a ketogenic carnivore diet, it might be 2 meals a day, might be perfect. If you can get all of your nutrition in those 2 meals, meaning you can hit your protein goal, you can hit all your macros and your calories with those 2 meals. If you are one of these people who just can't eat a lot at one time, then you may need 3 or 4 meals a day, even on a carnivore or keto diet. Because if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just too full, I can't eat that much in one meal, and then you're going to end up being low on your proteins and fats, then you're not going to hit the nutrition that you need to hit for the day. That is a problem. The other thing we don't want to do is extended fasts. I never recommend extended fasting unless it is in a medical context under medical supervision for a medical condition, in which case you're probably not worried about pre and post-workout nutrition. You have bigger fish to fry. But if you're worried about pre and post-workout nutrition, if you're worried about building muscle and burning body fat, we need to not be doing extended fasts. It is not going to help with those goals. Okay, so getting that out of the way. In terms of timing, the closer to your workout that you eat, the smaller the meal should be due to digestion. All of these things about eating 30 minutes before your meal, 45 minutes before your workout. Really, I think that was driven by a lot of supplement companies wanting to sell their supplements, because the truth is, if you're eating a meal, even if it's a small snack, you're not going to digest that whole meal and get everything you need to get out of it for the benefits they say it gives you for your workout within 30 minutes. It just ain't going to happen. And some of you, if you have gut issues, which I have slow gastric emptying, it takes longer for me to digest. So for me, I like a good 2 to 3 hours before my workout. I like having a meal 2 to 3 hours before my workout. And the way I do it, it's very intuitive these days. If I get hungry and I was planning to go to the gym and I look at my this happens to me a lot. I look at the time and I'm like, oh shoot, I was going to go to the gym in an hour from now and I'm already hungry now. So I better have a snack or a shake or something to tide me over, because if I wait an hour and I don't eat again, and then I have to go train, I'm going to be too hungry by then. So that's kind of the way I think about it. It's never about, oh, I need this and that because of this science. No. Okay. It's how am I feeling? Do I feel digested? Do I feel ready to train? That's the most important thing. Okay. The other thing you can play with, and we're going to talk about fuel in a little bit, but is adjusting the timing of your fuel source. So you can load your fuel earlier in the day because your body is going to need that energy throughout the day versus at night, right before you go to bed, because that's when you want your body to wind down. So thinking about carbs or fats or both, wherever you fall in that spectrum of carbs and fats, that is your fuel. That is your energy. Think about it. When you consume energy, it's to give you energy. If you consume carbs or fats, it's giving you energy. So if you have extra energy at 10 o'clock at night, you don't need that energy. You're not doing anything, from 10 until whatever time you wake up the next day. So that could be a little strategy to use. I usually, that's something I've tried before, is front loading my fuel earlier in the day, my first meal or my second meal of the day, and then having a smaller meal later at night. In general, regardless of when I'm training. We'll talk a little bit about timing of your training as well, because I know the biggest question is always those of you who train early in the morning, or you have something going on in your schedule, which is a great question I think Julie had, about, I have this going on with my schedule. If I can't train until here, that's the way to think about it. Y'all are on the right track there. Is, what does my schedule require? What does my lifestyle require? What are my responsibilities and obligations? Let me look at that first, then plug in, where does my workout go? Okay, once I've plugged that in, where are my meals going? With the original thought, which is, let's space them out, 2, 3, or 4 meals a day, space them out, and then look at where that is with your training and consider, am I going to be really hungry, or am I going to be full, or how am I going to be feeling? All right, so the content of your pre and post workout meals. So what's in the meal? Once again, this is not as important as you might think. And as people out there on YouTube may, just put out clickbait to tell you, you need to be eating this much of this and this much of that. All right, the important thing is this: hit your protein goal for the day. That's what matters most for muscle protein synthesis. So everything you've heard about the anabolic window, it's not that important, guys. The most important thing is what I already shared as it relates to protein. You want more than one bolus of protein in a day. Mainly because us ladies, we're eating one meal a day. We're probably not even going to hit our protein with eating that much. And if you're eating enough protein, so if you're around here, you're probably, hopefully, eating enough protein because you've learned how important it is. It's a lot of protein to get in. And that's likely going to be more than what you really want to eat at one sitting. And even if you think, oh, that's okay, I can go ham, I can eat so much steak, your body is not going to be happy with having to process all that nutrition at one time. So hit your protein goal for the day within 24 hours with 2, 3, or 4 meals, spread them out, and then manage your fuel intake, your overall fuel intake for the day. What matters for muscle growth is that protein throughout the day. What matters for fat loss is managing the fuel intake, not overdoing it with your fuel throughout the day. That's what matters most. So at the end of the day, especially if you are struggling with a crazy schedule with work and kids and obligations and all of this, and you're like, oh, but I need to maximize my nutrition for my training. What's maximized or what's optimal for you is figuring out how it's all going to work with your crazy schedule. That's the most important thing. So, all All right, so the content of the meals, don't stress out about that. But what I will say is the more protein that you have pre-workout, probably the more full and uncomfortable you're going to feel in that workout. So if you're getting closer to that workout time and you're like, I need to have a little snack before my workout to tide me over, don't make it a massive amount of protein. Make it small. Make it a small amount of protein, maybe half the size of a normal meal, or a third if you're doing like 2 meals a day on carnivore. Maybe make it a third or a fourth of what a normal meal would be, so that your body's not having to do a lot of digestion before that workout. So if you are doing like a smaller snack or meal before your workout just to tide you over, then it may be more beneficial for this meal to lean into the fuel and pull back a little bit on the protein. Let it give you the energy for your workout and doesn't have to give you a whole lot of your protein for the day. All right, let's talk about the fuel. This is what I was alluding to earlier. The basics versus the advanced. We talked a little bit about advanced in the last masterclass, but let's talk about the basics first. For your fuel source, pick a fuel source and stick with it. The pre-workout fuel that you eat in that little pre-workout snack, or even in the meal prior to your workout, even if it is 2 hours prior or more, that fuel in that meal should be the fuel that your body is prioritizing. So if you're on the higher end of the spectrum, you're on the higher end of low carb with your carbs. Your carbs are, I like to use 100 to 150 as a good example because that's the higher end of kind of the low carb lifestyle. If you're like under 75 grams of carbs, what I would probably do, especially if you're like 50 grams or under, you're purely keto carnivore, your pre-workout fuel or the main fuel source in that meal prior to your training should be fat, not carbs, because you're fueling more with that. So assess for yourself, which fuel is the preference for my body? That is the fuel that I'm using to give myself energy for my workout. The other piece is that you have to consider fast versus slow digesting fuel sources. So for carbs, this would be simple starches or simple sugars without a lot of fiber. This is not the time to load up on a ton of veggies, or this is one of the reasons why a lot of people do not recommend using fruit as your pre-workout. Now, certain fruits are more simple and certain fruits have more fiber, but the stuff with a whole lot of fiber could be a disaster before a workout. So this is where if you're going to go for carb sources, you're going to go simpler. A lot of bodybuilders use rice cakes, rice, cream of rice, cream of wheat. Sugar, they might use, sugar sources. For fats, the fastest digesting fat is going to be MCT oil. And that was a big question a lot of y'all had about MCT oil as a pre-workout. In my opinion, if you are going to have an actual pre-workout snack, meal, drink, whatever it may be, using MCT oil as the fat source for that's going to give you the quickest energy. When you're think about on a keto carnivore diet, when you are having high protein with high fat meals, and we're talking about animal fats, we're talking about a ribeye, we're talking about New York strip, we're talking about whole eggs, right? Even adding butter and things like that, but especially like the meat with the fat on it, most of you could go for hours after that without eating. Why? Because it's slow digesting. That protein with that fat together is very slow digesting. So that's not the kind of thing you would want to eat. You don't want to eat a steak as your pre-workout. You could have it in your pre-workout, in your meal that you're having 2 or 3 hours before a workout, but you wouldn't want to have a steak within an hour of a workout. you're probably going to be overfull. Your body's going to be working through that. You're not going to get that. Like if you're using the pre-workout snack as a way to drive energy for your workout, it needs to be small and it needs to be fuel and it needs to be lesser on the protein, and the quicker the fuel, the better. And so in the context of a ketogenic carnivore diet, MCT oil is going to be your fastest fuel source. Pretty much all other forms of fat are going to digest slower. But let's say you're an hour before, I used to do back in the day when I was eating more seeds and nuts and fruits, I used to do avocado and pumpkin seeds would be a great little snack for me pre-workout. Maybe a hard-boiled egg. So I'm getting a little bit of protein. I'm getting some fat, some healthy fats. These days I might do a shake, a protein shake with 1 scoop or less, maybe even half a scoop. So that's only 10 to 20 grams of protein at the most. And I might put some MCT oil in it or MCT powder or something like that. If when you're thinking about, I'm not going to dive into a lot of the supplementation side of it on this class. Like I said, I want to do another whole supplementation discussion. We can talk about pre-workout and all of that as it relates to supplements. But if you're talking about like a protein powder, whey protein is going to be one of the fastest digesting. Whey isolate, not concentrate. The milk proteins have the casein in them, including whey concentrate. So those are going to be slower digesting, but a whey isolate. Beef protein isolate, in my experience, I mean, I wouldn't do it within 30 minutes. I usually don't feel great if I were to chug like a whole bunch of beef isolate, like a scoop or more all at one time before a workout, but maybe an hour before might be fine. But ultimately, I'm a big fan of just meals, just eating my meals. I typically will do either 2 large meals and 2 smaller kind of snacks in a day, or I'll do 3 meals a day and I spread those out. And then my workout just fits in between them. And I don't worry about any particular pre or post workout snack or meal or drink or anything. Now, if you wanted to play with advanced strategies, so you're in the context of a keto carnivore diet, but you want to play with carbs for your workouts, you absolutely must be adapted first. It is not going to have benefits for you to be putting in carbs in all the time when you are not already fat adapted. In that case, you might as well choose carbs as your fuel source and lower your fats, your dietary fats, and just say, I'm choosing carbs. But if you're trying to do keto carnivore and you're not yet adapted and you're like, I'm going to try adding carbs for my workouts to give me energy, either choose carbs as the fuel source or choose fats as the fuel source. It's got to be one or the other. You got to, and as I was mentioning Christina earlier, you're going to have to give yourself time to adapt. And it's not going to happen if you keep putting the carbs in again and again.
12 to 18 weeks.
Bronson says 12 to 18 weeks. So don't mix fuel sources unless you're already a pro with consistently following either one or the other. You don't want to be going back and forth. And you certainly don't want to be eating a lot of carbs and fats all at the same time. That's how we all got fat in the first place. So, all right, that leads us into our next piece here, which is the emotional brain that I always talk about, that limbic brain that's always trying to trick us. This is the biggest key here. And this is why I see people chasing down all of these gurus and doctors and latest thing and latest science and this thing and that thing. Pre and post workout nutrition is not an excuse or a justification to eat crap.
Don't bust my bubble.
Inflammation is never the goal, fam. Always think about the food selection. You always want to choose foods that work best for your body, or you will create a situation that is harder to recover from than the workout in the first place. You don't want to be putting inflammatory substances into your body pre-workout and then adding stress to your body in the workout And then even worse, putting more of it into your body after the workout. And now you're having all of this to recover from. It's like a triple whammy. I've been there. I've done that. Okay. When I was still in my relapse with bulimia, I let this damn voice back here convince me, oh, there's all these people who, they eat Smarties before their workouts, or they eat Sour Patch Kids before their workouts because it's simple sugar. And I started driving my butt to the Dollar Tree before my workouts and getting some junk candy. And I did that for a consistent period of time. Trust me, it is not a good thing to do to your body. So while all the things you hear out there may not be as extreme as going and eating candy before your workout, there's all kinds of things out there. And if you are trying to maintain a keto carnivore diet for a particular reason, and then you find yourself, oh, but so-and-so says I need carbs, so I'm going to go do the carbs, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. You got to check your limbic brain. You got to check yourself and say, hey, where's this coming from? Is this a justification because I really just wanted an excuse to eat sweet potato fries? Because I'll tell you what.
Why are you looking at me?
A baked sweet potato is not the same thing as sweet potato fries. I always like to point this out too. Competitors who are eating carbs, they're not eating the kind of carbs that you think about. They're not eating donuts and cupcakes and cookies and candy before workouts. They're eating oats. They're eating rice, plain, without anything on it. It's not sexy. It is for the macronutrient. It's for the fuel. That's what they're eating it for. And they may dress it up with honey or something to make it more palatable. Yeah. So, yep. Christina says, I had an Olympic trainer tell me to eat the rice, oatmeal, and ground turkey with lots of shakes. Yeah, you know what? That doesn't sound appealing to me. I mean, I did, even when I was keto, I was doing turkey, a lot of turkey egg whites. Ugh. You couldn't pay me to eat turkey now. No interest. At Thanksgiving only. So let's see, where did I leave off here? Yep, beware of that emotional brain, check the thoughts. Let's go back up to all the questions because I think I covered what I really wanted to cover here. As it relates to the meal timing, meal size, what should go in the meals. Let me see if y'all had any questions in here that I missed. Okay, I think it's good. Oh, this is a good comment here from Leah. Fat repeats before workout, even though I'm keto and fat adapted. Maybe it's because I normally have ribeye beef fat. It could be, absolutely, because it's slow digesting. So that's not going to be through your system probably by the time you get to your workout. So in that case, I would look at that timing and say, could you add it, could you separate it by another hour or so, give yourself more time to digest it, or have a smaller portion of it. Or if you're eating it closer to your workout, then maybe switch to a different source there. What are you doing over there? All right, I think I covered the things that I saw here in the chat. All right, let's go up to the questions from the group. All right, is there any benefit to continuing with the KG protocol? All right, so Ketogains protocol, for those of you who are familiar, they have a pre-workout that they recommend that incorporates its coffee, salt, MCT oil, and protein powder. So she says, is there any benefit to continuing with that as a pre-workout? And if coffee on its own is a great option, is there a substitute for coffee for those that don't like coffee and can only drink it with protein powder added? All right. So for this one, I would say, the question of, is there any benefit to continuing this protocol, would be the question or the thing that I mentioned earlier, which is it working for you or is it not? Do you feel that it's working for you? If you feel it's working well for you, then sure, there would be benefit to continuing. So this is a question you have to answer for yourself. Do you feel better in your workouts when you're using it versus when you're not? Have you tried not having it and have you noticed the difference? So that's what I would do first. For anyone considering, if there's something you're already doing and you're wondering if you should do something different, try doing something different and see if you notice something different. So I would try that first. And then if you don't like coffee without protein powder, well, what I would suggest too is, I'm guessing if you're asking, I don't know, I could be assuming here, but only because I'm not a fan personally of a whole shake, like a whole scoop or more of protein in a drink before I work out. So I would question how soon you're having that in advance of your workout. If, once again, this is very individual. So you're going to have to consider for yourself, why am I thinking about changing it? Have I ever tried it without all of that? But maybe you'll think about giving a little bit more time so you can digest that protein that's in there, or maybe cut the protein powder in half. One thing I used to do when I trained in the morning and then I worked a 9 to 5 and then I had a long commute and I was training, that must have been when I was training in the mornings before work. So I would make something very much like that. It was a protein coffee with MCT oil, but I don't think I ever did a whole scoop of protein powder. I usually did like half a scoop. And then I would drink that on the way to the gym. And then I would finish about half of it. I would put it in the locker, and then I would have that as my post-workout on my way to the office. So it wasn't too much to digest. I wasn't trying to get the benefits of all the things that are in it in time for my workout. But I'm sure particularly, here's the things that I think are beneficial with that. The coffee, the salt, and the MCT oil. You could even do that without the protein powder. And for years, I have done that. And I still do that today. I do a keto coffee. I call it my keto coffee. It's coffee with MCT and salt, or chocolate element, something like that. I usually do that pretty much every day. And then now I add coconut milk as well. Sometimes I'll add some protein powder, but I don't add a lot of it. If you're eating a meal after the workout, you do not need protein powder before the workout, as long as you're able to get your protein goals in for the whole day. That's the most important thing. Now, there were a couple other questions, I think probably coming from the same place, about these particular things. Coffee versus caffeine, MCT oil. Yeah, and then salt. So here's the thing. If you are keto carnivore, if you are training fasted, we're going to talk about training fasted in a moment, salt is going to be your best friend before a workout. And for Christina, if you're trying not to go back to the carbs because you don't have the energy for the workouts, try the salt first. Try increasing your salt, or taking a shot of it, or taking more of it than you're used to in your water before your workout, and see if that makes a difference. I highly suspect that it will. So yes, there's absolutely benefits to, I mentioned the MCT earlier. It's very fast digesting. You're going to get the energy from it quickly. Salt, incredible for many reasons, for energy, but also for the pump, the blood flow, all that good stuff. The coffee, the biggest thing with the coffee is the caffeine. Somebody was asking about the benefits of the coffee without the caffeine.
Coffee without caffeine?
Yeah. Here's the thing. I haven't seen anything saying everything you look up pretty much in the fitness industry as, studies that tell you about the benefits of coffee for training are all from the caffeine. So if you don't like, I know Venetia was asking, if you don't like coffee and you're just drinking it to be this pre-workout, try green tea if you like that. I like matcha, he hates it. I like matcha, so I will make a half a protein shake with matcha and MC. Sometimes I'll do that. I'll mix up matcha powder with half a scoop of my protein powder, vanilla, and then some salt and some MCT, same kind of thing. So it doesn't have to be coffee.
Can I say something?
Yeah, jump in. Come on in.
So when it comes to coffee or caffeine in general, remember that the way it works is by basically tricking your mind into thinking that you're waking up, right? It's playing a reverse psychology game with your biology.
It blunts the adenosine.
It blunts fatigue, essentially. It turns off the fatigue signals. If you're trying, which I've never understood why we use that as a pre-workout. I'm not trying to sleep. I'm not trying to stay awake. I'm trying to actually perform, right? So if you're looking for something that's going to help you perform better, salt is your answer 100% of the time. Just do more of it. It's going to increase blood flow. It's going to increase oxygen uptake. It's going to increase your body's ability to access fuel. It does all of the things that you're looking to do, and something that's actually going to help you have the energy to work out and do better when you do it.
And if you are keto carnivore, you could need more of it in general.
A lot of it.
And that could be the issue, especially when, my ladies, you are working out and you're keto carnivore and you just think something's wrong because you're like, I have no energy. It is usually an electrolyte problem. So let's see. But also, there are studies on caffeine and exercise performance. There's a ton out there. You can research it. But it doesn't have to be coffee either. If you hate coffee, you can do other forms of caffeine. A lot of pre-workout supplements out there, that's the main ingredient, is caffeine. It's another reason to beware if you have issues with caffeine. If you are an anxious person, if you struggle with anxiety, you want to avoid caffeine because it can cause your anxiety to become much worse. So when you are looking at pre-workout supplements, you got to make sure you look at it, because unless they say that it's stimulant free, it's going to have caffeine in there. So, all right, let's see. Fasted training. This is the biggest question I always get. There's nothing wrong with training fasted if you are not extended fasting. So it's been 24 hours and you haven't eaten anything, and now you're going to train. That's when I would say you are giving up muscle protein synthesis. You are giving up your gains. Not a good idea, right? But if we're talking an overnight fast, a typical intermittent fasting window, I'm not a big fan of 16-8 or 16 hours or more fasted. I always say, like, it's okay to do that if you can get all of your nutrition in those 8 hours. But I personally do more like 12 hours, 12. You could do 14-10, that's not going to be a big deal if you are eating post-workout. So this is where the pre and the post-workout meals matter a little bit more. So what you did with one is going to matter with the other. So if you have been 16 hours fasted and you are training, you better eat a post-workout meal pretty quickly after that training, because you've now had a long window of time where you did not get any nutrition. So we're going to want to get some nutrition in you pretty soon. And on the other side of it, if you are training and you're not going to be eating for hours after that, let's say you train and then you start your fasting window, I don't recommend that. In that case, if you eat a pre-workout meal closer to your workout, that will help. But for instance, I wanted to talk about Julie's question. She said, I'd like to know if it makes any difference if you eat all of your protein earlier in the day, but working out in the evening. I usually stop eating around 1 to 2 p.m., but I have to wait until 5 to 6 p.m. to lift with my husband. Would it be better if I changed my eating window to later in the day? In this case, I would say yes, because if you stop 1 to 2 p.m., now you're waiting 5 to 6. So we're talking a good 4 to 5 hours in between eating and lifting. If you are not eating again after that, it makes me, I want to ask more questions. I don't know if Julie, if you're still in the chat, but if you are still in the chat, please let me know what time you typically go to bed and then what time you're having your first meal in the morning, because that's going to matter. This is when we start looking, this is when it matters, because if you're eating your last meal by 2 p.m., then you're training at 5 or 6, and then you're not eating again, and you're going to sleep, and then you wake up in the morning. Now we're talking, let's say you eat early, let's say you eat at 8 a.m. That's 16 hours. I think that is 16 hours. That's a long time to train in the middle of that time and then give yourself a long window after that. Go to bed at 10, I think you mean 10 p.m., and then eat at 7 a.m. So yeah, so 7 a.m. So we're talking 2 p.m., 12 plus 5. So that's a 17-hour window that you're not eating. I would say that's a little bit long. That's longer than I would want you to fast for, particularly if you're training right smack dab in the middle of that time period, and then you're not having anything after that last meal. So what I would do in your case is either move that last meal a little later in the day, or this might be a good time to put in a post-workout small meal or a protein shake after you train. So, you get done training around 6, at least at the minimum, have a protein shake. And at that point, it should be more protein. So the protein shake somebody might drink before a workout, I would say don't do any more than 20 grams of protein. If you're having a protein shake post-workout and it's your only thing you're going to be consuming the rest of the night, this is where I would want it to be over 30 grams of protein minimum. Don't have to put a lot of fat in it because you're not going to need that energy at that point in time. But this is where, or you could even be one of those people, okay? Let's say you have that last meal around 1. You could do a small pre-workout and then a small post-workout. That might be an option as well. But yeah, I definitely would not. Basically, the key here is you don't want to go a long period of time fasted, train, and then still have a long period of time fasted. So your body needs to uptake nutrition so that it can build. Oh, there you go. I love that. Thinking about adding a couple of turkey burgers after my workout. Boom. Yes, absolutely. Or beef burgers. I just am not a fan of turkey. Can you tell by now? I do not like turkey. But if you enjoy it, at least a protein bolus. All right. So otherwise, yeah. So that was a really great example. I'm glad you brought that up, Julie. That's basically the key there with the fasting is, we don't want this long period of time, hours on end, 12 hours on one side, another 5 or 6 hours on the other side, and we're not getting anything in there. Also assess for you too, for yourself, how you feel when you go into that workout. If that last meal around 1 is like super, is a large meal and you feel fine going into that workout, great. But if you're going into your workout and you're like dragging, then definitely I would play with the timing there of those meals. Yeah, turkey burgers are light, but I'll tell you what, I would much prefer a lean beef burger. I still would prefer lean ground beef to turkey. And it'll be much more nutrient dense. Although turkey also has a lot of tryptophan, so it can help with sleep, I suppose. All right. Celeste had asked, well, it wasn't really a question, but she said, I personally just have coffee with nut pods and then electrolytes with creatine before, and then I eat my first meal after, usually eggs and a meat. I find eating before hard because waiting for digestion takes so long. Agreed. I would be in that camp as well. She said, I've been wondering if maybe a boost of fat before would help with this. Yeah, this is where I would say adding some MCT to that coffee would be a great idea, or a full fat coconut milk rather than just the nut pods, because you're not getting any fat with that, like a gram or two. And I know Becky earlier had asked how much MCT. I only put 3 or 4 grams of MCT oil in my coffee. I don't need to put a lot of it. It's very individual to how much a person can handle. It goes right through you. So, I always say to start small, start with a teaspoon or a few grams at a time and work your way up. At the most, I might do half a tablespoon. I never even do a whole tablespoon of MCT. Unless maybe I'm doing like a post-workout shake, which I haven't done in a long time. But if I was going to do like a post-workout shake with, 1.5 or 2 scoops of protein to get that higher protein, then I might put a whole tablespoon, because then it'll balance out the protein a little bit better. I personally don't like to do like super heavy fat meals and then super high protein with like no fat meals. I like to evenly distribute my fats and proteins. Fat helps you digest protein, ladies. So you don't want to be doing like super lean meals without any fat, and then these massively high fat meals. It really can help your digestion when you have a nice balance of your fuel and your protein macros together in a meal. Now, I will typically, like I said, eat the higher fat meals earlier in the day, my leaner meals later in the day. But even if I'm doing whitefish, which has like 1 gram of fat maybe, then I'll add some olive oil to it. So it's really important to have at least some fat in your meal to help with the digestion process. The other thing Celeste mentioned was, another thing I've seen is that it's good to have protein first thing in the morning before or with your coffee. I did this for a while when I was drinking protein coffee, but stopped since I gave up dairy. I think I saw Nat does this too. Not sure if I experienced any benefit doing that. That's more about, for some people, like drinking coffee, especially black coffee, can be really hard on the digestion, hard on your system because it's highly acidic. This is one of the reasons why I used to do apple cider vinegar shots in the morning. I stopped doing that. And then I started having apple cider vinegar with my meals. Now I don't take it at all anymore. But I switched it because I have low stomach acid. So I take apple cider vinegar, or now I just use the betaine HCl, and I no longer use apple cider vinegar, but to boost my stomach acid so I can digest better. If I was taking that shot of MCT in the morning, not MCT, I'm not recommending that you shoot MCT oil. That would shoot back out of you, I'm sure, in many ways. Shoot apple cider vinegar, which at one point I was doing the apple cider vinegar in the morning and then my coffee, and then I would eat hours later because I would fast, which is another thing I've changed. I no longer fast in the morning. But it's good to have something in your coffee to blunt that acidity. So if your nut pods and salt is enough to do that, great. I like to do coconut milk, a little bit of MCT. It kind of takes the edge off. Sometimes I'll put some protein in there. You don't have to have your protein first thing in the morning or before your coffee. That was, I think, when I talked about that a while back, it was after Andrew Huberman had came out with the studies about delaying coffee consumption or delaying caffeine to later in the morning. Now something else has come out debunking that. So here, this is why ultimately at the end of the day, I don't chase the science, because we only know what we know until we know better. And there's always going to be more studies and there's always going to be more science. So at any rate, plus I spoke with my functional doctor and he was like, no, you don't need to delay coffee for any reason. We want your cortisol high in the morning. And my cortisol was low. We wanted to get it higher. So we didn't have to worry about, that's the other thing with coffee that people are concerned about, the caffeine early in the day, giving them too much of a cortisol spike if they're already having high levels of cortisol. I was on the other side of that. So it was definitely not something I needed to avoid. And that is why I like to bring this stuff up, because it is so individual. This is why what Andrew Huberman says, or what Thomas DeLauer says in a video, or whatever science comes out that people, everybody all over YouTube start talking about, it may not apply to you. It's still context dependent. So yeah, ultimately what she gets at here, not sure if I experienced any benefit doing that. What you always have to consider is, what is the benefit I'm trying to get from this? And then you can assess, am I getting that benefit or not? Ultimately, that's what's going to determine what's best for you. So Jenny mentioned the similar thing as Julie. She said, my last meal is around 1 to 2 p.m. I drink Element or Redmond salt before I work out and after. Nothing to eat after I work out. That might concern me. I don't know if Jenny's going to be watching this later, but that might concern me. Same conversation we had with Julie about, when are you eating again after that? It may be too much time, to really get what you're trying to get out of your workouts, right? We are working out so that we can build muscle. The workout is breaking down our bodies, breaking down our muscles. The recovery is where we build it. So recovery includes getting those amino acids, getting the nutrients, getting the nutrition that we need to recover. So that one's a concern for me, Jenny. Take a look at your timing of everything and look at how long you're fasting, how long you are not eating before and after. So when you're thinking in general, everyone, about your meal timing around your workouts, consider the full time you have before, between the meal before the workout and the meal after the workout. That's going to matter more than how tightly you plan the meals close to the workout. Another study came out saying there was no difference between eating 1 hour. I can't now remember if it was pre and post. This was one of the ones Menno Henselman's recently posted about, that somebody asked about in the group. I think it was an hour pre and post versus 3 hours pre and post. They didn't find any differences. So that was not an issue, but that's 6 hours in total. What they didn't look at was 8 or 12 hours in between and what that would have done. So look at how long that window is. And if you're eating in the midst of a fasting window, if you're training, you're not going to be eating in the midst of a fasting window. If you're training in the midst of a fasting window, that's when it may become a concern for your recovery. So definitely take a look at that. I am the first person who will always say, if you are an early morning workout person, you are getting up and working out 4, 5, 6 a.m., I am not going to push you to try to eat before that workout. It is most likely you're not going to digest and utilize those nutrients between the time that you consume them and the time that you work out, when you're working out that early. But what I will say is, if you're one of those people and you're training at 4, 5, 6 a.m., if you stopped your last meal at 2 p.m. the day before, that's a concern for me. I would say, if you're going to fast and then wake up and train fasted, have that last meal a little bit later in the day or closer to bedtime. Still, I'd say ideally you don't want to be eating within, at the tightest, 2 hours before bedtime, ideally 3 hours before bedtime, or even 4 hours before bedtime. So if you go to bed at even as early as 8 p.m. to do a 5 a.m. workout, you could eat at 5 p.m. versus 2 p.m. or 6 p.m., eat at 5 or 6 versus 1 or 2 if you're going to be working out in the morning. So hopefully that helped clear some stuff up for y'all. I think I answered all the questions that were posted. I did slow down a little bit. We're a little bit over an hour, but does anybody have any other questions about pre and post workout? Oh gosh, Christina, what in the world? Have you been around? Have you heard my other stuff? 80-20 best fat to protein? What does that even mean? Are you talking about ratios? I think I know what you're asking, but clarify for me. Is 80-20, do you mean 80% fat, 20% protein by calories? The thing we hear going around the carnivore interwebs? Okay, best for what is my question. Is it best for what? %80 protein? I'm so confused. For the fat to protein, 80% Are you asking about beef or are you asking about macros? I'm so confused. Maybe I missed a conversation earlier up here. I'm not sure what you're asking. Beef, not macros. Okay. I thought you were asking about like the whole thing that they say in the carnivore world of, oh, you should be eating 80% fat and 20% protein. Whew, I was like, girl, it certainly is not best for fat loss and muscle gaining. That's for sure. All right. So you're talking about the 80-20 ground beef. Is that best? Is that best for what? Once again, it might be the best tasting, but what do you mean by the best? Maybe you're asking about what ground beef is the best tasting. Bronson doesn't like all that fat, so he just drains it out. But he's got me buying him 90-10 now. Oh, okay. Here we go. Is it for the best absorption and protein synthesis? All right. So protein synthesis, I think you're talking about muscle protein synthesis, which is that utilization of amino acids to build muscle. Not any protein source. Any complete protein source, meaning any quality protein source. So pretty much any animal-based protein source. Chicken, turkey, fish, beef, lamb, venison, you name it. Eggs. Even dairy. Any of those protein sources are great for muscle protein synthesis. You don't need a particular percentage of ground beef to best absorb the nutrients and the protein. So the key is having some fat for digestion to help digest. And yes, through that process is where the absorption occurs. But not having fat or having a lower fat ground beef, for example, a 90-10 and 85-15, even a 93-7 or a 96-4, having less fat in the beef is not going to affect your ability to absorb the micronutrition or particularly the protein. It's not going to impact your body's ability to absorb amino acids. It may impact your body's ability to get the fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K, from that food. But if you have fat at all in that meal, any fat at all is going to help you absorb those fat soluble vitamins. So even if you added olive oil to 96.4 ground beef, you can still absorb the nutrients from that beef. So no, you don't need a particular percentage of ground beef for best absorption and protein synthesis. Any lean ground beef is just as good for that. Comes down to personal preference, really. And then your macros, it really, your macros are what are going to determine, can you afford 80-20 ground beef in your meal plan? Maybe a smaller amount of it or mixing it. I like to mix and match. So I have some Wagyu in my freezer right now that I haven't used for a while because it's so high fat that it is hard to fit it into my macros when I'm cutting. But for instance, I was just thinking about this the other day. As we're getting low and I'm starting to pull things out of the freezer, I also have mahi-mahi in the freezer, which is a nice, dense whitefish, right? I love to cook Wagyu and mahi together. So the mahi cooks in the fat from the Wagyu, and then I get more protein from the mahi, so then it evens the macros out. So I like to do a lot of mixing and matching. We've been talking a lot in the academy this week about bacon wrapped chicken, because I bought some chicken tenderloins and wrapped them with bacon, and then that has become the hot meal of the week. I like to do that with bacon wrapped shrimp, things like that. So yeah, you can mix and match all kinds of proteins and fats. Okay, so yeah, this is a different concept, right? So she says, I like shakes that have no fat with high protein. I heard that fat is needed for the best protein synthesis. So it's not necessarily about the protein synthesis, but for instance, you have certain proteins, like if you're doing a keto chow has added a lot of vitamins and minerals into their mix. Most protein powders do not add a lot. Well, some of them do, but a lot of them are just the protein and they're not adding micronutrition. But for those vitamins, A, D, E, and K, which are fat soluble, you do need some fat for that. But you don't need a whole lot of it. And that's a totally different situation when we're talking about a high protein shake versus 80-20 ground beef versus a different kind of ground beef. Whole foods are different bag altogether. So the fat, though, does help lubricate and move things through your intestines. So when you are consuming super high protein without any fat, i.e. PSMF, which I just talked about on last week's masterclass in the advanced fat loss strategies. One of the reasons I don't recommend PSMF is because it can be a disaster for your digestion and your bowels, because things slow way down, because you don't have that fat helping to move things through. Yes. Love this comment from Willie NC. According to Don Layman's research, by the way, anybody who wants to know anything about protein, this man is the godfather, the grandfather, the OG of all things protein when it comes to the scientific literature. So Donald Layman, according to him, you need 30 grams of protein to spur protein synthesis. Yes, this is one of the reasons why I encourage 2 or 3 or 4 meals per day of at least 30 grams of protein per meal. Now, what we're trying to do with pre-workout nutrition, when I mentioned having a shake that's less than 20, up to but less than 20 grams of protein, we're talking about a pre-workout shake if you're going to do something like that, because that is not the time when we're trying to get energy for our workout. That's not the time where we're trying to get our bolus of protein. So that would be separate and apart from your higher protein meals, which ideally all of your meals in your day should be 30 grams of protein or more, particularly at least 2 meals a day. And that was one of the things that Don Layman also is One of the reasons why I started recommending to get your first bolus of protein in your day by or around 10 a.m. Because that first meal of the day, that first bolus of the protein in the day is the most important one. The one that breaks the fast is where you really need a good solid amount of protein. It should be bare minimum 30 grams, but ideally more than that. Particularly anybody around these parts, I encourage you to all be consuming well over 100 grams of protein a day. That's going to be tough to do. If you're doing 4 meals a day, then 30 grams per meal would be great. But if you're doing 2 or 3 meals a day, you're going to need more like 40 or 50 or more grams of protein per meal. Another great comment. Yes, 30 grams of animal, not pea. Exactly. Plant-based proteins are far inferior to animal sources of protein. And that is in the powdered form, and that is in whole food form. So when you are calculating, here's a little tip. When you are plugging everything into your nutrition tracker and you're looking at hitting your protein goal for the day, that quality protein is what matters the most. So we don't want to be consuming a ton of vegetables and trying to get protein from the vegetables. That is not the main purpose of vegetables if you are a vegetable eater. The grand majority of your protein goal for the day should be met with quality protein sources. We're talking complete proteins. So real food, animal products, or a whey, a casein. If you can handle that well, I will say. I don't handle it well, and if you don't handle dairy well, you're not going to handle casein well, and you may not even handle whey. And if that's the case, then I would go to an egg-based protein or an egg white protein powder, because that's still complete protein. If you do the beef isolate, it is not as complete. It does have all the amino acids, but it has a smaller amount of leucine, and leucine is the really important one for muscle protein synthesis. So this is one of the reasons why, while I represent and recommend Equip Protein, which is my preferred protein powder, it is a beef isolate. I do not use it as a meal replacement. It is not a meal replacement unless you're combining it with another protein powder like an egg, another whole complete protein powder that has a higher leucine content. Or you got to double up or triple up your quantity of Equip, like 2 scoops or 3 scoops, to get the same amount of leucine that you would get in 1 scoop of a whey, a casein, or an egg. Or if you do it like me, I use my Equip for little treats and desserts. So I'm pretty much tacking that onto the end of my meal, and it's just like a little boost because I just had this whole meal with all these quality proteins. So it just gets tacked right onto that. But I don't use it to replace a meal. It's not going to do the same thing for you. It's treated more like beef isolate is treated more like a collagen or a gelatin. Collagen and gelatin are also not, the kind of protein that is going to drive muscle protein synthesis. So these are supplemental. They should be not replacing our main meals. Cool. Oh, this brings up something that would be a great little pre-workout snack if you need a pre-workout snack. She mentions, I do use it as a meal replacement in Greek yogurt. So here's what you could do. Instead of using it as a meal replacement, have your main meals, at least 2 large meals, maybe 3, and then have your little Greek yogurt protein treat as a pre-workout. Now you don't need to get 30 grams or more of protein in that bolus because that's not the purpose of that meal. I do it with coconut yogurt, which is higher fat, has a little bit of carbs, and it doesn't have the same amount of protein as Greek yogurt or any dairy-based yogurt. So for me, I'm getting fuel from that, and I'm getting a little bit of protein from what I add from my protein powder. And I also use a powdered multivitamin and mineral that I add to it as well. And if I do it at night, then I use my magnesium powder in it. So it's a great little addition on one side or the other. Oh yeah, Leah, I agree. Makes the best ice cream. Which is another great little combo, doing your yogurt with your protein and making it into an ice cream with the Ninja Creamy, or even just a blender. It is, I have a pistachio one that is going to be my little dessert in a little bit. So yeah, if I do, like I mentioned, sometimes a lot of the time I'll do 2 large meals and then 2 snacks. That's essentially what I do. I'll do my 2 large meals, my breakfast and my dinner, and then I might have my protein yogurt or shake before my workout, and then I might have my little protein yogurt dessert or protein creamy as my dessert. So, all right. What a great little chat tonight. This was fun. An hour and a half. I better shut this thing down. And now it's finally starting to get dark and it feels like nighttime. So that means it's time for Coach Bronson and I to have our Amazon Prime TV time. And then it's time for bed. All right, ladies, this is great. Thank you for making this fun and interactive. I always love it when I have people to talk to and it's not just me feeling like I'm talking to a screen. So, next week. Did I figure out what we're talking about next week yet? I don't think so. Toying with the idea of that supplements masterclass, or I've still got to look and see if I've done a carb cycling class or not, because I can't remember if I did one yet. I know that y'all have been waiting for that. So I'll figure it out and let y'all know. And then we got to talk about this challenge coming up. So I will be doing a live Q&A like I always do every time we launch a new one. I think I'm going to do it on Saturday, but if you're in the Facebook group, I will be posting all the details there and on my Instagram as usual. Tina, it was so great to have you here again. Oh my gosh, so awesome. And so awesome to see all the things you're doing in the space. I hope to see you live again soon at some event this year. Y'all go make it a wonderful week. I can't believe it's only Monday. But whenever you're watching this, for those who will be watching the replay, congratulations if you made it all the way to the end. All right, my live crew, have a great night. Go crush it this week. I still have a pump from today's workout. Yeah, buddy. All right, I'll see y'all in the group. Good night.